There we go. Let's get started. Well, very welcome everyone to the first session in our webinar series. And today we are airing live directly from Sweden and from Ohio. So the fantastic benefits of doing things online. This is amazing. And especially very welcome to you, Jill. Hi. We're going to listen in to you very soon and hand over the control to you to take us through this interesting story. But first of all, I would very much like to present the agenda for this webinar. And before I actually do that, I want to start with saying that this is the first session in a series of 10 different episodes that we are going to air every other Thursday, starting off today. And we will be presenting both cases that we have produced together with our customers. We are also going to present a few of our content partners, a few projects that we are working on currently. And it's going to be within both natural sciences and history all through. And hopefully we also want to introduce you during one of the webinar sessions to our industry segment and the industrial applications that we also do. My name is Louise. I'm the CEO of Interspectral. I'm going to give you a very short presentation of what we do before I hand over to Jill. And if you have any questions, there is in the bottom bar of your screen, you should have a Q&A session or Q&A window. There you can ask your questions to everyone, and you can also reach out through the chat window if you want to chat separately or have anything that you want to ask in private, and you can turn that to me or to Jill. So the agenda for today is to first of all present Interspectral, so you know which company that is behind all this and who we are, what we do. And then we get to know the woman behind the wrapping. It's the main topic for today, and we're going to stay there with our focus. Then we'll have a Q&A session. I'm sure that there will be a lot of questions, and take the opportunity to ask them. You can choose, you can use the Q&A window for that. And Jill and myself, together with my colleagues that are with me here, are happy to help and answer the questions that you have. Last but not least, we will have a short summary and present the next webinar that is planned for Tuesday within 2 weeks. And today, well, the questions that are going to be answered today is, of course, who was Nessir, the data mummy that we are going to be introducing? What methods were used to digitize and visualize this replica of Nessir? And of course, why did Boomshop decide to do this? Why did they go through with this project? And hopefully there will be more questions, as I said. I'm today in my older son's room. We're all working from home. I know that the situations are very, well, it differs a lot between all the countries around the world. We have people listening from China, we have from the US and also in Europe, and we all sit in different situations. But we want to do this webinar series to focus on something else than the COVID pandemic, something that is way more positive, something that keeps us going, and to show all the good work that is possible to do during this lockdown or break, if you prefer to call it that, but also what options there is to actually take this out online to a much wider audience than just to the visitors that come into the different venues. So with that said, Interspectral, we are a Swedish company that have been around for about 5 years. We are located in a small town, just about 200 kilometers away from Stockholm. We are 10 people working in the company today, and we have 2 consultants that are with us as well. One is working in the UK and another one is in the team here in Sweden. What we do, our core business, is that we transform complex 3D data into engaging experiences and insights. Well, it sounds very complex, but it really isn't when it comes to the presentation that you're going to see today. In other words, what we do is that we take in 3D data, raw 3D data, and we transform that into interactive exhibitions that you can engage with by peeling off layer by layer. You can look into it, kind of like a virtual dissection. And this is what we do in our software that is called Inside Explorer. And Inside Explorer is a software that is created by the founders team in the company. And it is the foundation of the company and the foundation in all of our products. We work within 4 different market segments, and digital heritage, or within science communication, that's where we started, and that's our main market. That's the core market for us. So we have been working with different museums and scientists and researchers for the past 5 years, creating hundreds of data sets that are either exhibited at the different venues or pre-packed and used as education material. And the next area that we work with is within education. We have a few schools all over the world, both universities and high schools, that work with Inside Explorer as an educational mean within both natural sciences and history. So these 2 areas is where we create the data and the data sets that are being used for the different purposes within these different areas. And I want to say that each and every data set that we create comes with a unique story. Each data set has an identity. And sometimes when you look at them on our website, for example, you don't see the identity behind the data set. So this way of broadcasting, as we're doing today, is a perfect opportunity to get to know the story behind the data set. And that goes from everything from the smallest bee to a huge mummy, or to a Viking sword in Norway, or to a human body, for example. And then we have another area, which is our industrial area, and that is still kind of a new area for us, but we have been working with it for the past 2 years. And it's kind of the same, or it is the same way of working. It's the same software, it's the same technology behind it, but the data that we produce here and visualize is used for analysis, calculation, and used for other purposes. So it's for industrial usage, but can also be used for education within that area, of course. And then we have the possibility as well to use our technology in AEC planning. We can show buildings, we can show different areas of cities, for example, and we can take part of city planning and bigger projects in that way. So these are the 4 market segments that we work with. It's a very short description, and I really don't want to keep focus on Interspectral today. I really want to keep focus on the Boonshof Museum and their fantastic project that we have done together. So I just want to say that if you want to know anything else about this, if you want to know more or how we can support you in any way, then it's very easy to reach out. The last slide, there is an email address that you can reach out to, and we're always open for a chat or a direct reach out. You can reach us on all the social media and on our website as well. So what we're going to look at today is to get to know the woman behind the wrappings. And the guest speaker is Jill. Now you have to correct me if I pronounce your name completely wrong here, but Jill E. Krieg Akrocko. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
That's good. And Jill, would you like to start with introducing yourself a little bit instead of me doing it?
Sure. So as you said, my name is Jill Krieg Akrocko. I'm the curator of anthropology and exhibitions here at the Boonshof Museum of Discovery, located in Dayton, Ohio, in the United States. I have worked here for about 10 years. My background is specifically in archaeology, and over the past few years, I've transitioned to doing less field work and more museum work and exhibition work. So at present, I have the collections department, the exhibitions department, and our sister site called Sunwatch Indian Village Archaeological Park all report directly to me. So I manage those facets of what we do here at the museum.
That's amazing. And which part have you taken in the production of Messier that we're going to learn more about today?
So for the exhibition here, the Ancient Egypt exhibition, I designed all the content and the layout of the room. I do all the content research, the object selection, the writing, and I kind of do the project management throughout the process. So I don't do graphic design or exhibit production, but I just guide the work and kind of manage the overall vision. We have a great team in-house. We have a graphic design department and a fabrication department. So everything that you see built in the exhibition was built here on site. So we're very proud of the work that we were able to do.
That's amazing. So you know the story and you know the exhibition very well then.
I do, yes.
Yeah, well, that's good. We're very eager to listen to this. So I'm simply handing this over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I hope I have set you as host. And I am just going to take my video down. So please, Jill, go ahead.
Yeah. So we are the Dayton Society of Natural History. As I said, we have two main sites, the Boonshoff Museum of Discovery and Sunwatch Indian Village. So today, I'm in the Boonshoff Museum of Discovery. The museum itself is kind of divided up into different segments. We are a unique facility in that we are an accredited museum, an accredited science center, an accredited zoo, and a recognized planetarium. So we have a lot going on here on site. We started in 1893, so we've been around for 127 years. The collection has grown and grown over that time. We presently curate about 1.8 million objects on site, so we have a lot. And one of our best and kind of most impressive collections, I think, especially for exhibition purposes, is the Ancient Egypt exhibition, which is an exhibition and collection that we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to start kind of at the beginning of the story and kind of build some momentum and anticipation here before we go in, so you have a little bit of context. So, the very first U.S. ambassador to Egypt was a gentleman named J. Morton Howell. And J. Morton Howell actually lived in Dayton, Ohio. He was appointed in the 1920s by the then President Harding of the U.S., and he left Dayton and went to live in Egypt. He loved Egypt so much, he wanted to bring that love for Egyptian culture back to his hometown. So while he was there, he was gifted objects, he collected objects, and he came back home and donated those objects to what was then the Dayton Museum of Natural History, which is the Boonshoff Museum of Discovery today. So we have this really unique connection with Egyptian culture right here in Ohio, which is pretty cool. I think it's cool. I'm a little bit of a nerd though, so I don't know if everybody thinks it's cool. So one of those things that J. Morton Howell gave us was the mummy Nessier. Nessier was excavated by Howard Winlock. No, that's not right. Winlock of the Met Museum in 1922. So the Met was doing lots of excavations of the site called Del El Badari in the 19-teens and the 1920s. This is during a time where you have this big Egyptomania going on, and they're actively looking for sites. So interestingly enough, when Nessier was found, she was found in 1922, which is the same year that they found King Tut. So right over the hill from Del El Badari is the Valley of the Kings, where they found King Tut. J. Morton Howell, who we just talked about, was one of the first people invited to see King Tut's tomb after it was opened, so that's pretty cool. So Nessier, she came out of Del Badari in 1922. She was gifted to Howell. Howell had a lot of different things going on. He eventually got the mummy to us in Dayton. She was donated to us in 1926. And Nessier has been on continuous display with us since 1926. So we've had her a very long time. There have been many x-rays and scans of her done over the years, but some of that data has been lost. Some of it was pretty low quality. The first x-rays were actually done with a mobile machine that they brought into a big kind of warehouse gas station type of place. So the early scans of her didn't really provide us with kind of the information that we really wanted. Nessier was also previously displayed in a very small room here at the museum, and it was interesting because the interpretation was pretty minimal, and we found that people would go into this room and they wouldn't even really grasp that the mummy that they were looking at was a real Egyptian mummy. So when I started at the museum in 2007, having a background in archaeology and anthropology, and there's a lot of focus on kind of the humanities aspects and engagement and respecting the past. I was always very underwhelmed by our Egyptian exhibit. And in about 2015, I distinctly remember getting a mailing in my mailbox, and it was just a little card, and it was interspectral, and it had a picture of one of their mummy tables on it. And I went into my CEO's office at the time, and I told him, I'm like, this is awesome. Like, we need to get one of these. And it kind of started this whole big discussion. So the next year, we actually partnered with the local children's hospital to get CT scans done of our mummy, which was a big ordeal in itself because she hadn't been taken out of her display in about 15 years. So at that point, we were also discussing some things with Interspectral. We had got the conversation going. We were talking to the hospital. We also partnered with a gentleman named Dr. Andrew Nelson from the University of Western Ontario, who has been a critical player in this whole project for us. And with everybody's advice, we were able to take Nessier out of her old display, transfer her to Dayton Children's Hospital, get some wonderful CT scan data done. And I will never forget when those scans popped up on the screen. I was standing right behind the x-ray tech, and they were just popping up. And I think my mouth was just like hanging open the whole time. It was so amazing. So then we took those scans, transferred them to Interspectral, and the magic started happening. So that kind of brings us to our actual exhibition, which I would like to first kind of walk around and give you a tour. As was previously said, with the COVID pandemic going on, the museum isn't what it normally is. We've been closed to the public for quite a while now, so it's pretty quiet. I got as many of the displays turned on as I could, but some things have actually been unplugged to preserve power, so there's 2 lights in there that I couldn't get on. But I got almost everything going. So I'm going to switch my camera around if I can figure out how to do it. Let's see, I can get it. Switch around. There we go. So I hope everyone can see this well. Can somebody just give me like a thumbs up? This looks pretty good, right? You can see it. So as we come into the exhibition here, we try to create exhibitions here at the Boonshaft that engage the entire family unit. So we're not really focused on just adults or just children. We try to incorporate layers of interactivity that give us exhibitions that the family unit stays together in. So we have kind of a traditional entrance to the exhibition space, or we have this fun little tunnel that kids can get down and crawl through, or adults if they so choose. So when you come into the exhibition, we have a mix of interactives for older kids and adults, interactive for younger kids, classic didactic panels and displays, and the incorporation of technology. So we're very proud of this. We made these torches in-house. Our exhibits team made them out of just a single block of wood. It's pretty amazing. Because we have exhibitions from lots of different time periods, we are not focused on just a specific time period in ancient Egypt. We're focused more on just the culture in general. So we've divided things by type, talking about different types of mummies. You can see we also have some cat mummies here. We have a kestrel and a small crocodile, which we also got CT scanned when we had Nessier CT scanned the big mummy, which we would love to add to the table one day. Some displays here. We made these Egyptian pyramid blocks, so kids can come in, they can build a pyramid. This keeps them busy for a while. We sculpted all of these in-house out of foam core. We made the tomb. We created a hieroglyphic activity that explains what hieroglyphics are, and then kids can use these magnetic tiles to write messages or decipher things. So this actually says Boonshoff, which is the name of our museum. And we have a couple of extra hidden messages placed throughout the tomb that kids can decipher if they so choose. And then here is Nessier. So in her previous display, she was inside her coffin, so you couldn't really see her that well. We built this brand new case for her and created this exploded view where she's actually lifted and elevated off of her coffin so you can really see her. We have an image of Del El Badari, the site that she was excavated from, behind her. So it creates a beautiful backdrop, I think, especially when I don't have all the lights on, so it's harder to see than it normally might be. We also decided to do a mirror on the top. I hope everybody can see that. So it really gives us a good view of her. So what I really wanted people to be able to do, what we really wanted people to be able to do, is to look at her here and have this very clear line of sight with the interspectral table. So this is definitely the focal point of the exhibition. It's centered in the doorway, so it's like you can't miss it here. You just come right in. And this is the home screen. This is a facial reconstruction of Nessier. So we were able to take that CT data and extract the skeletal data. And we were able to, I should have brought it in here with me. We actually printed a of her skull, which we have in the lab that we use for programming. And that skeletal data was used to create this 3D reconstruction. This was done by the Virginia Commonwealth University here in the States. So this is also a really great view of Nessier. It makes her human, which is what we really wanted to do. We want to have that human connection so people see her as a person. We decided to make the home screen black and white, so we weren't overly interpreting her appearance too much, so people can kind of not be persuaded one way or the other. We have just a basic description of Nessier. She lived during the Third Intermediate period in the 25th dynasty, about 700 BC, or roughly 3,000 years ago. Just a very preliminary introduction text. We wanted to keep this first screen pretty short and sweet because we do have in the didactic panels a more detailed story of this kind of background of how she was found and excavated and things like that. So you tap in. And then we load. The very first layer of her is her coffin. So the coffin was not part of the x-rays. This was actually done again by a gentleman named Bernard Means of the Virginia Commonwealth University. So the coffin layer was actually done through photogrammetry, which took a long time to do this layer. So what's cool is, you know, if you look at the display here, it's static, right? You can look at it, but you can't manipulate it. With this, we can spin. We can see something, the underneath side, which you could never see in a traditional display. We have various data points, and these texts were all created in-house, and we worked with Interspectral over a series of months with how much text should be in the data points, the exact placement of the data points, which is really important because when you pop the bubbles up, where the bubbles land, you don't want it to block the data. So this seems like it should be simple to add a data point, but it takes more thinking through than you would think. You can zoom in too, which is pretty neat. So you can get pretty up close. And it works just like a big, touchscreen phone or tablet. So even though it seems like, well, this is really high tech, it is a familiar type of interface. So people can learn how to do it pretty quickly. And what is cool, if you are struggling at all, you can press this little question mark button, and it does bring down some prompts to help people understand how to scroll through the different layers. So we have this first coffin layer, then we have the interior of the coffin, which you can see actually has an image of the goddess of the afterlife on the interior of the coffin, which is something that even I had not seen before we took Nessier out of the sarcophagus out of her coffin a couple of years ago. So then we move to her inside of her coffin. And then we move to just Nessier herself. What was really, really nice with Interspectral and the team that we were working with, they were able to take that CT scan data. It came on a bunch of CDs and we sent it, and they cleaned it up. So there were some what I would call like noise and particles around her, and they were able to clean a lot of that up and make it look really nice and clean and just very, very streamlined. And so we didn't have any distractions from people. You can also take and slice this through. So you can look at the layers this way to see inside. You can also use this scroll bar to go down from the top. So up to this point, with this layer, I always say this is the stuff that we could see with our eyes. We could see the sarcophagus, we could see the wrapping layer, we kind of knew all of the things up to this point. It's this next layer, bam, 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 which is the super interesting layer. So this is where we really uncover the lady behind the wrappings, right? So we will able to see Nessier in a way that we never have before. And like I said, we partnered with Dr. Andrew Nelson from the University of Western Ontario, and he was able to interpret the biological anthropology, and we were able to interpret the mummification treatments of Nessier to learn more about who she was. So one of the very interesting things that I hope you can see is she's wearing a wig or a hairpiece. And you can see here these braids in her hair. So we knew based on a small little hole in the wrappings, we could see a little bit of a braid. We assumed that she had braided hair. But what the CT scan data told us is there is a separation between the skull and the braids, which is indicative of something sitting on the skull. So it's not her actual hair, it is a wig or a hairpiece. Egyptian people wore wigs often, if you guys are familiar with Egyptian culture, which I'm sure many of you are. So she was probably buried in her very best wig. She doesn't have any amulets or anything in her wrapping, but she does have some beads placed throughout her wig itself. You can see her incision here very clearly. So we have, you know, just some information about what the incision is. Her hand placement, her hands are kind of pulled in and sitting on top of her pelvis, which is a very traditional placement for her time period. So that is kind of another thing that's confirming what we knew about how old she was. The skeleton data is where things I think get really interesting in terms of learning. We have the tell signs that she's a female. You know, the skull and the pelvis tell us very clearly that she was a female. A couple of things that we didn't know were her age. We were always under the impression that she was around 30 years old. But what we found is her clavicle or her collarbone here was not totally fused. And this is the last bone, the last long bone to fuse in your body. So she was much younger than we thought. She's about 18 to 22 when she died. There's no clear pathology on her bones that would tell us cause of death. We don't know that, but we know she was very young. You can also clearly see that her wisdom teeth are not fully erupted here. Here's the third molar, or the wisdom tooth here, that's not come out yet. We also found that she has retained one of her baby teeth. So this is a baby tooth or a milk tooth here that hasn't fallen out yet, which is kind of interesting. So she's retained this baby tooth into adulthood, which does happen sometimes. That would have fallen out eventually, but it just hadn't fallen out yet. Her brain is there. Let's go back one. Her brain has not been removed. So you have her brain here, it's intact. Her lungs are intact. She does have a bundle in her abdomen, which is either a wrapped bundle of linen and things, or her organs were taken out, wrapped, and placed back in to kind of fill in the cavity. These are all very typical of the 25th dynasty mummification practices. Oops. So we have the skeleton data. We also have the X-ray data, which again is confirming this is where we were able to put the information about the clavicle not being fused. She is missing one of her toes, which is one of the only kind of pathologies that we see on her skeleton. However, that was done post-mortem. You do see a lot of breaks in mummies in their toes and in their legs here, because as they're being shipped from Egypt overseas back in the day, they would take those coffins, and rather than leave them flat, they would tip them up. And so they would smash their legs into the bottom of the coffins and often cause damage to the feet, the ankles, in these areas. So what I love about this, you know, one, it's interactive, but it really does give people, especially this mummy layer, they see this layer and they really start to see Nessir as a person. And that is one of our biggest priorities, to create that respect and empathy for the past. So we are so happy to have partnered with Interspectral to be able to create this. We are so very proud of it, and the process has just been wonderful. So that's kind of the basic breakdown of the table. Does anybody, do we want to turn it back over for questions, or what do we do next?
I'm sure. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for this presentation. It really is an amazing case. Could you tell us a bit about do you know anything about the life she lived, or the society she lived in, or anything similar to that?
Sure. So we know that she, as I said, she was excavated from a site called Del El Badari. She was found in a 25th dynasty tomb that was actually tunneled into an older tomb complex. So I believe that it was an 11th dynasty tomb that had been used, and it had been reused, and there was kind of a chamber in the bottom that had been tunneled out, and she was found in there. You can see this photo of her. She was found in there with another mummy by the Met when Herbert Winlock found her during his excavations. So in ancient Egypt, as you may or may not be familiar, mummification wasn't a universal practice for all of the dead. It is something that is status-based. So not everybody is mummified. Not everybody was mummified in the same type of ways. So we know that Nessier was of a high enough status that she did receive a mummification, and she was buried. She has a nice sarcophagus, but she has no amulets. She has, very little with her. So we know she was high status enough to get this treatment, but not to get the best treatment. So we assume that maybe she was some type of temple worker or worker for a rich family that allowed her to be placed within the cemetery complex around El Badari. What's really cool, and another thing we're very excited about, is when we partnered with Andrew Nelson, he is creating a large mummy database called Impact. And that database is taking all of the mummies around the world and incorporating their data. So Nessier's CT scan data is now in Impact. So there are new studies being done on her and on those scans all the time. So I am very excited and hopeful that as the years progress, we might be able to learn more and more about her that would shed more information onto her actual life.
Thank you. I'm not fast enough on my unmute button.
Oh, it's okay.
Well, thank you. That's really interesting. We have received a few questions as well. I wanted to, first of all, would you say that the digital version of the mummy take away anything from the experience of the real mummy? For example, do people just run up to the table and miss other things in the exhibition?
I don't think so at all. I mean, it's such a great enhancement because if you think about, people today, we have technology all around us, and it's something that people are comfortable engaging with. So it allows people to take just looking at her to a new level. So what I find is the table actually creates a deeper appreciation for the mummy because people can go to the table, they can look through the different layers, and then they're like, oh, but there she is right there. When normally they may have spent 5 minutes looking at her, now they might be in the gallery for an hour. So it gives an even deeper appreciation of her and makes her display even more meaningful because of those layers of interpretation. Really great element to the table is, as museums are changing and you have a lot of repatriation and ethical situations, you may or may not in the years to come decide to keep a mummy or any set of human remains on exhibition for the public to see. So at some point, and we have these discussions often, if we choose to take Nessier off display for ethical reasons, we can still utilize the table so people can still learn her story and learn from her and about her without viewing her actual physical remains. So that itself gives us so much opportunity to continue to share her story without having to share her physical body if we choose to.
That's really interesting. That's very good. Another question is that it feels like a very expensive thing for a small museum. How can small museums afford this type of technique?
So what we did, I mean, it was a long process for us. So being, working at a small nonprofit museum myself, I spend a lot of my time writing grants and searching for funding. So for this particular exhibition, we received a grant from a local foundation, and it was a lot of work, but we were able to support this exhibit through a fund called the Kettering Fund, which we have gotten a lot of support over the years. I wrote several grants that I didn't get for this exhibit as well. And then we actually reached out to the state of Ohio. They have a lot of funding available that supports cultural projects, and we were able to get the grant that we received matched to support this whole exhibition. So I think we got about $400,000 to put this exhibition together, and that included covering, the development of the content and all of those things. So it is, it's not a cheap thing to do, but it has a really big impact. So from my perspective, when you're looking for a strong grant funded project, a project like this has a very strong and compelling narrative, because you're teaching about, you're teaching about Egyptian culture, but you're really teaching about people, and you're teaching about empathy. I always say, like, if I can teach somebody to have empathy about a person who lived 3,000 years ago, then I can teach them to have empathy for the person standing right beside them. So projects like this, I think, are fundable if you can find those right grants to apply for.
That's really good. Well, do you have any tip or advice that you can give to those that are in the situation where they want to proceed with creating a bigger exhibition, but they don't know or where to find the grants for it?
Sure. I mean, in the States, there's a lot of support through the National Endowment for the Humanities. So a project like this with an interspectral table showing a person, any grant that has the word humanities in it, it's going to be a great project with that. The incorporation, our tagline for this exhibit is ancient culture, modern technology. So I think if you are looking at grants, technology grants, humanities grants, and really focusing on how the interspectral table marry those things together so well, you can again create very compelling narratives for a grant application.
That's good. And the narrative and the story behind the data sets, as I said from the very beginning, each data set is unique, and it comes with the story, and it's very important to tell that. So it's not just an item or an object that you show, it's actually a person or something that has real value when it comes to it.
Yeah. And I always say, as an archaeologist and an anthropologist, the artifacts by themselves are just artifacts. I don't study artifacts, I study people. So when you're moving forward with exhibition work or grant work, I think if you keep that in mind, it always strengthens the narrative and the content when you're done.
That's really good. Last but not least, one of the listeners want to have a look from the frontal view inside the body. You think you can go back to the table?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's see. Here we go.
Here we
go. So from this one, you want to cut through the layers from the front?
Yes.
Try not to go too fast. Here we go. So you can see, you can kind of open up here. So then you can see.
See the inside, and you see the organs, and
yeah. So this is that bundle here. You can see the lung here a little bit. I keep touching it. Here we go. Here. The back side of the ribs. And then we have the spine. There were some previous suggestions that she actually had a lot of arthritis in her back. And that was one of the things that we had previously said. But these new scans, one of the ways you can see arthritis is the lipping of the vertebra. And she's got a teensy tiny bit of that, but not really. So that's something that we kind of no longer say that she has evidence of arthritis in her spine, because we didn't really see it on the new interpretation of her.
So how is the visitor's response to this?
It's interesting, because I was a little afraid, honestly, that it might cause some people, it might be a little too much for people when you see, that layer of Nessier, but people are very fascinated. I see a lot of, parents or adults with younger kids engaging at the table together, which is, makes my heart happy, because that's what I always want to see, is people doing things in groups together. So I'll see like the kid with the mom, and sometimes the kids are better at manipulating the table than the adults are, because kids are just like instantly good with technology, you know. But the experience has been so positive. We've had so much support from local media, from the community, people. It really has helped to reshape our identity in the community, because a lot of people would see the Boonshock Museum as more of a children's museum. And this has really elevated us to almost make us more of a destination for adults also. So it's been such a positive, wonderful addition to our museum.
And have you, do you use this table in any kind of special tours, or any special programming activities like tours or anything like that, taking her out on around the States?
Well, we don't move the table, but we have used the content in programs, and we are just right outside of the gallery. We have a table, we have a program table called the Discovery Table. Can you see it there?
Mm-hmm.
And we do a lot of in-house programming at that table. There are ancient Egypt programs that we do there, ramps, all types of things. We are also working to incorporate a distance learning element into our museum. And I actually had them put a special outlet in the ceiling to be able to mount a camera and projector, even though it's not there yet. I'm hoping to one day be able to get that in so we can use the table for distance learning programs. I'm also in the middle with the coronavirus happening. We are creating all new programs called Summer Camp in a Box, because we usually have summer camps here. So I'm creating a brand new summer camp called the Boonshoff Time Machine that's all digital. And we're doing a whole day on ancient Egypt. And as part of that day, we're doing things like mummifying a hot dog and things like that. But we're going to spend an hour walking around this gallery talking to kids from all over the place about Nessier and showing the table. So I'm pretty excited about that coming up.
Sounds amazing. Sounds really good. We all need to be creative and innovative when it comes to come up with new things to engage with the audience now during the
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the last question, have you ever considered, or do you think anything about putting this into VR?
You know, I think our big thing, we've talked about, putting some of the content up online. My hardest thing about that is I like to be able to control the message, especially when it comes to Nessier or anything related to a person. So I think if we were to, for example, put the cat mummies and the crocodile mummy and things like that on, I'd like to prototype that as a virtual reality or digital experience first before we would put Nessier up online. Just because we haven't kind of veered into that territory yet. We are doing more and more kind of online content. We started a YouTube channel and things like that. And I did do a couple-minute video on the table that we posted on YouTube as well. But I think we'll get there. We're just maybe not there yet, but we talk about it.
It's one way of perhaps enhancing the experience eventually.
Yeah.
Well, that's super good. Well, thank you so much, Jill.
You're welcome.
We don't have any more questions now, but if there is anyone that has any more questions, is it okay to reach out to you personally after this?
Oh yeah, of course.
That's good. Then we will send out your email together with a follow-up email after this webinar, so they can reach out directly.
Okay, great.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Then I'm going to take over. Let's see if I can take over the control here again, and make myself host. I'm not sure I can do that. Well, we have a chat here, Jill, from Benjamin. He says, thank you, Jill.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's excellent. That's super good. Okay, do you think that you can stop? Oh, we have another one. Jill, great presentation from Linda.
Thank you.
Do you have the possibility to shut your video off? And I can
Me?
take over. Yeah, you. Then I
Yeah,
think
let me see.
I can come back here. Otherwise, it's going to be. Let's see if I can. No, okay, I can't do that. Well, you just have to not look at me then. Let's just move over directly to the last piece of the puzzle here. So the next webinar is going to be within 2 weeks, Thursday in 2 weeks, and we are then going to take a look at historical buildings in 3D. And we're going to listen to the interesting story of Linköping Castle. It's a castle in Sweden, taking us back to the 12th century, a bishop, a king, and a bloodbath. The historical building has recently been produced into an interactive exhibition showcasing the development of the castle itself. It's a very, very interesting story. And I really hope that many of you that are with us today are with us the next time as well. Everything is going to be up on the web, and we are going to publicize different channels that we communicate. And also you will get, as I said, a follow-up email after this with a possibility to join the next webinar as well. So last but not least, thank you everyone for joining. It was a pleasure having you here. We're very happy to welcome you back, and very happy for your commitment and participation with your questions, and for listening to this session. If you want to know more about Interspectral, reach out to us directly or take a look at our website. And Jill, I will send out her email address so you can reach out directly to Jill. Yes, okay. Then it is, I believe it is time to say goodbye for now. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening in Europe. Have a great day in the US. And I lost track of China. It must be in the middle of the night there. Well, sleep tight then. Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for watching.
Bye.
Bye.